Okay, everyone, welcome back. So tonight I thought I would do something a little bit different. There had been a request I had gotten for doing like off. Oh, sorry, Visual Studio would like to install an update. There's no way this is going to go poorly. So I'd gotten a request to do authentication and authorization inside of a WPF app, and I started looking at doing that, and then quickly realized there's a few other concepts that kind of need to be covered before getting all the way into that. Most specifically, configuration and secret management, which is oftentimes quite problematic for thick client apps like WPF. It's not trivial when you have something that contains, say, a client secret or a client ID. Where do you put that? How do you share that and put it out securely? One thing I'm going to say just straight up front, when possible, avoid putting anything in your WPF app that you don't want someone to have access to. Effectively, once you put the code on your user's machine, you've lost control of it. There's nothing stopping them from breaking it apart. There are things like obfuscators that you can apply to your code to make it harder, but nothing's impossible. All you do is slow them down, make it not worth it. Quite often, the best solution is to put all of your proprietary stuff that you don't want somebody to see, not in the app, but somewhere else. Put it on a web service or similar. And just don't put it on the machine, because like I've demonstrated on previous streams with like Snoop, somebody can just go on and turn those UI elements on. You haven't really blocked them if all you're doing is controlling local bits. Somebody could always get by it, and you have to keep that in mind when you're writing your code. So, but with that, I wanted to look at the IConfiguration setup inside of C#. So this is something that web developers are probably very familiar with. ASP.NET Core, when it came out, Microsoft added in this great configuration thing. And a lot of people kind of assume that, oh, that's just ASP.NET Core. Well, no, it's not actually specific. You can use it anywhere. So we already started an app before, already leveraging the generic host, the Color Kraken stream 2 or 3 ago. I've worked on it a few times now. So we're going to dive back into that one again and see about actually getting it set up for secret management, for configuration with a KeyVault, have all of that stuff plugged together, see what it takes, kind of what is a little weird and different about when you're doing it as a desktop app, and then hopefully that gets you set up for doing configuration elsewhere. So before we get too carried away, I wanted to call one thing out. So I need to... that button. There we go. I wanted to call out this tweet from Dimitri because I thought this was rather awesome, because this question has come up, I know, on this stream before as well. But, and there's the link for anybody interested. So Dimitri is a principal program manager with Microsoft, and he was just posting out a thing asking examples of Windows clients that are open source on GitHub. And this whole thread is awesome. So it's not all WPF. Some of these things are WinForms related stuff. Some of these tools I use and love very much. So there's a lot of good ones. So if you are looking for really cool projects to look at and learn from, I threw Chocolaty's one in there because I think that's the one I used on my stream last time someone asked as well. But if you're interested, that is a great one to take a look at. Okay, and then for people who are interested or want to follow along, so it is the Color Kraken repo, which is live on Chocolaty now. So if you would like to install it, you can either grab the precompiled binaries here, or you can just do Choco install Color Kraken, and you're off to the races. I think I actually have I do have it. So here is what for those people who may have forgotten, here is what the app looks like. It's just a simple way of being able to manage your theming inside of GitKraken, because GitKraken is awesome. And I'm realizing I haven't left the title set to the main window. We might need to go fix that. There's a 1.1 release. But before I get the release going, I will do that. I will also say I had a colleague interested in building a port of this for Mac, and so I don't know Mac, but he does. So I said, have at it. So people are interested. There's a Swift project in here. I'm not entirely sure how far along he's got. Look. A little bit of work in here. Cool. So Go Bruce, go. 3 days ago was the last one into there. Sweet, and I just installed an update to Visual Studio, so there's no way that messes up anything I was thinking of doing. Okay, so let's go back into the code. Visual Studio time. And color cracking, how convenient. It was my last thing open. What a shock. Okay, and then I thought I had, where did I put it? So, yeah, so if people are interested, the documentation page for this is here. Make that bigger. Oh, no problem, Justin Bieber. Yeah, those WPF apps from that Twitter feed are pretty cool stuff. So some of them I've looked at before, some of them were new to me. So there were several repos that got new stars from me because I'd never heard of them before. Okay, so this one here, this is the IConfiguration, or as they labeled it here, configuration in .NET. And the big idea here is inside of WPF, back from ye olden days, people used to go properties, and obviously this UI is different now. But there's this settings thing here where you can create application settings. And this is back, oh man, I don't even remember. I think this is pre-existed when I started in WPF and .NET. So this has been around for a long bloody time. And with these settings, yeah, it goes back to forms. With these settings here, you really have two choices. The settings come in two forms, user and system. System are shared across the system, as you might expect if there's multiple installs from different user accounts, and are read-only. And then user settings are read-write and are saved off in user profile directory, off in La La Land, which is great. These work for very simple use cases. If that's all you want to do is, hey, I just want to store some strings. I don't want to think too hard about my configuration. I just want it local. That's fine. So if all you're doing is something really simple, this will work. There's one tiny little gotcha. Depending on how you do your installers or what your distribution mechanism is, sometimes you can get bit by settings not updating, or every install blows away my settings and it starts fresh from the defaults. Really annoying. Just be aware of that. That can be somewhat problematic because it's tied to it's tied to the identity of the assembly, and so without like upgrades or things like that, it can be a pain. So this is an option. It's not the option I'm going to recommend though. So the configuration in .NET, this is the option we're going to take a look at. And so out of the box, without doing anything, you get several of these things for free. So you get settings files such as appsettings.json. Again, ASP.NET Core developers are very familiar with this one. Their project template comes with these files just sitting there ready to go. Environment variables we also get for free. And then we also get command line arguments for free, just for doing nothing. And by doing nothing, what I mean is with the current state of our app. Because before we talked about the generic host and setting up this host builder and getting that running with a WPF app for the purposes of dependency injection. It turns out it's a lot cooler than that and can do more than just dependency injection. So down buried here in our create host builder, there's another nice little method. Oop, J is not what we're going for. So what is it? It's configure, blah, 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 app configuration. So you'll note there's two configure star configuration methods here. App configuration, you're wanting to configure it for your app, not configure it for the generic host. So just separate those two things in your head. But this guy here, and so you'll note it takes a delegate. The two parameters are a host builder context and a configuration builder. So we'll do the host builder context, configuration builder, long and verbose names, just so it's clear. Boom. Okay. So the host builder context we don't care too much about. The more interesting one is this configuration builder. So this guy here, as the name implies, this is where we can start plugging in configuration to do stuff, which is pretty cool. So how do we go about doing this? Because this configuration builder ultimately is going to get us to the point where we can pull out an IConfiguration. So let's muck with our view model real quick, just so we can see what I'm talking about. So let's do an IConfiguration. But we'll note this. Oh, no. Use the right namespace. Pretty please. Okay. So breakpoint at the beginning of our view model, and you'll note this IConfiguration interface is coming from Microsoft Extensions configuration namespace. That is not something I have explicitly registered here. Okay? Just by default, we're going to pick some stuff up for free. And I like free stuff. So, fire this guy off. And diagnostic tools, you are in the way. Go away. Okay, and you will note our configuration now has stuff. And so if we do my locals window, because this way I can keep it going without worrying about my tooltip closing. Okay, so underneath our configuration, you'll note we have some providers. And so a couple of these that should be obvious right away, the ones that we were picking up for free. So our app settings one that just automatically came in, which is great. And then we've got another JSON provider that's pointed at appsettings.production.json. So there's some concept of environment that we can use to kind of toggle. That's a little less useful for a WPF application where you don't usually control the host where your application's running. It's a lot more useful for things like web services where you'll have a little bit more of that control. But somebody can feel free to prove me wrong. And then environment variable provider. And you'll note it's just defaulting to no prefix. So the first question comes, well, how do I get my configuration out? Because we could go through the IConfiguration interface directly. This is one option. This is not a great option, right? So we could do configuration and get or get value is probably easier, and start pulling something out. How about my value? And string my value. Put that there. We'll pull it out as a string. We'll read it there. We should really put this stuff somewhere. I was kind of thinking it might be useful to like, rather than grabbing the default theme, like remember the last theme or something, but for now we're just going with breakpoints. This will be good enough. So that will read the value out, and then in order to actually get something in there, we probably need our JSON file. So let's go ahead and do one of those guys. Okay, JSON file. And we're just going to do appsettings.json. Boom. Okay, now one thing to note right away. So I right-clicked on the file and went properties. So this is something worthwhile to know about, is when you have file type. So the default CS proj for all of the new projects, so it's called the SDK project format, which comes from this little bit right here at the top. If you see like an XML thingy above this, you're not on the SDK project format, and your project file is probably huge. And you'll note there's a lot of stuff that we get for free. Like the old CS proj file, you had to reference all your files, and it was big and ugly. This is much cleaner and nicer because it comes with a lot of well-defined defaults, such as if it's a .cs file, compile it as though it's C#. What a wonderful default. But you'll note our app settings one, when we look at its property, its build action is set to none and copied output directory is set to do not copy. And that's not quite what we want. So what we can do here is we can drop down and say, okay, copy the file to our output directory if the file is newer. And this is going to be pretty good. But you'll note when we edit it through Visual Studio, the helpful UI does what we want, but it does it very specific to an individual file. I prefer to do something more akin to this. that say, if I add a JSON file to my project, always copy it. Like, I almost never have a situation where I have a, ooh, that looks, my indentation settings look funny. Or, there. I almost never have a situation where I have JSON files added and I don't want them to go anywhere and I just want them to stay at my project root. That's pretty unusual. Okay, so app settings.json, and then we called the setting we wanted my value. Sounds great. Let's come in here. My value gets value from app settings. Okay, let's fire this guy up. And hopefully it works. Otherwise, I'm going to feel a little bit like a fool. Hey, look at that. It pulls it out. Yay! We can read a string. Huzzah. And what's important to note is that this set of providers, this is a hierarchy. So the order that providers are added in here matters, because the more specific providers or the later providers are going to override the previous providers, which is great because now you can start to build up sort of, hey, these are my common settings and then these are my more specific ones for my particular use case. Again, when you don't control the host, you got to be a little bit more careful with that, but we don't have to rely on just these settings files. We could choose to change this up and add in our own JSON configuration provider that does something more specific, which is cool. The one thing about this setup here, which is great for getting configuration in and rolling, is this is checked into source control, right? So I don't actually want to put things like username and password in here. That's a bad idea. So I will say that again. Please, please, please do not put sensitive values in your repos. That is bad, bad, bad. Fortunately, that's what we're going to fix tonight. I may have had too much caffeine today. It's possible. If I'm talking too fast, please tell me to slow down. I may have had a lot of caffeine today. Woo! You wake up tired and now you feel like there's a bit of a buzz. Okay, so one other thing to note too. So rather than just a string value, let's do something a little more interesting. More Mountain Dew. Robert, you're a bad influence. Okay, so let's go through and let's do something more interesting than strings real quick. So, well, I'll just do it right in here. So let's go through, we'll create a record. So how about public record settings. Yeah, that sounds good. String value, and how about string last template? Does that match the name of this? Last theme. That's the word I'm looking for. Boom. Okay, so simple record, nothing fancy. So let's now imagine I want to do this. And I'm going to pull the value out of settings instead. So before I just had a simple string and I was pulling, I mean, how else are you going to beat your high score on the blood pressure machine? Oh, that is, I don't know if that one go. Before I say something I regret. So before we were just pulling a simple string out, and that was easy. Name, value, name, value. But more often than not, what we have is we want to have something a lot more complex. We don't want just simple types. We can do simple types. That's a good place to start. But very often we want to start organizing these things into nicer groupings. And JSON, conveniently, has a hierarchy, right? Like JSON isn't just a set of name values. It kind of is, except for the values can be complex objects that then have more name values and it descends all the way in. So let's go through and let's do this. So if we go settings, and we're going to do this, and I already forgot what I called the things, value and last name. So we'll do value, my awesome value. That's not how you spell value. And it's important to get your JSON syntax correct. And then we said last theme. Custom theme. Now, obviously, we could put more things in here. We could keep doing more nested types. But what we can do now is put a breakpoint here and fire it up. Oh, and it didn't. What did I do wrong? If the WPF app doesn't have JSON stuff dependencies, is it good to add them in the settings format? You can still go through and do it with the settings. So and here, let me pop, because I didn't actually show them. I just didn't want to add them to the repo. But here, let me actually go through and show what that looks like. Because, so it is not bad to do it this way. I will say that. It is not horrible. So when you go into the project properties and click the little button to add it, so you'll note here there's a list of types. There's kind of a lot of the usual characters you would expect with your primitives, and you've got some special built-in support for like date time, GUIDs, time spans, that kind of thing. And you can actually add in your own types here. That is a thing you can do. The UI doesn't help you, but you can certainly make it do it. And then you'll note scope, user, or I guess application, not system. I had that name wrong, I think I said earlier. But the short version is read, write, read. And you can set them up here. So if you're just looking for a quick and dirty way to do persistent settings, this definitely works. It works. The moment you want to get more complex, this quickly runs into limitations. It's also worth knowing that because this is stored on the local system. If you want to have something stored out elsewhere, like for example, maybe after somebody logs in, you want to give them some sort of access or whatnot, this is not the place to store that. This is just an XML file in a well-known directory. So worth noting. So it's not bad to store it there. It's just limiting. So if you're cool with the limitations, it's not bad. I'll say that. Get value settings. What the heck did I do here? Settings. Did I not? Is get value not appropriately break apart custom types? What did I do wrong here? We might just do this. Well, the other thing you can do is just straight go right in on it. The application settings area is where I like to store all of the default settings. And again, that's not a bad place to put it. If you're just looking for where do I put my configuration settings, it works. It definitely works. Why are you... What am I missing here? Configuration. Oh, is it configuration get section? Is that what I'm missing? Yes. Okay. That's what I did wrong. Hold, please. I can't remember the APIs. Okay, so ignore that. That's a lie. So configuration, get section, settings. There we are. Var settings section. And please don't copy this code. There's a cleaner option. We'll get to it in a minute. Settings section, and then we can do something like get value. There we are. So if we want it, this is the manual way. So if you ever find yourself in need of it, this is the manual option. So value, last thing, value, and this is the last part I'm going to do the manual way because it's already annoying me. And last theme. Spelling counts. Though not always, as I discovered earlier today. I was doing pipeline work and spelling definitely bit me. Okay, so pull out the nested section. Inside of the section, you can pull out individual values. It's very similar to what we did pulling values straight off of the IConfiguration. But with this, you can start building up hierarchies for this. Okay, let's not do this anymore, because in general, taking in an eye configuration is not something that I typically would recommend you bring in through your into your view models, because very typically your view models are not going to need the entirety of eye configuration. That is almost certainly not what they're after. More often than not, your view models or services, they're going to need bits and pieces of the configuration. They're going to need maybe the base URL for a web service. They're going to need to know the last theme that the user had selected, something like that. They aren't going to need all your configuration. So this is usually way overkill, and it's, in my opinion, a bit of a code smell to have it in. So what is the better option? So I made this lovely little settings class up here, so let's actually use it. So there is another lovely interface called iOptions, and you should stop debugging when you start typing. Let's see, settings. So we are going to use iOptions, and we're going to call this settings instead, because that other one is bad. Okay, get rid of that. Okay, this is by far preferable, because you'll note now inside of my code, I'm not thinking about eye configuration. I'm not thinking about settings, or I'm not thinking about individual values anymore. I'm literally just going, oh, here's my options. Let's pull the value off. And now I've got last theme and value I can work with. This is by far more preferable, because now in my code here, my view model, I can focus on the portion of configuration that's important to me. I don't need to worry about all of eye configuration. I don't need to remember keys. I don't need to remember any of that stuff. I just need to do this. Okay. So, but how do we set this up? Because if we run this right now, there's no way for this to get populated for us, because we haven't given the configuration any knowledge about, hey, how do you populate this? So let's go back to our app. There, I already have it open. Okay, in our configuration here, and actually down here on our services. So what we need to do is we need to actually register up the options so that we have them. So what we will do is we will do services, let's see, and then there's add options. Hey, almost like exactly what we wanted. And we will do our settings option. So should I rename this? Is that clear that this isn't a built-in class? I'm going to rename this. Just to be clear that this is not some built-in type. We decided to try this way. We use LightDB for application settings, and we store all small settings classes as is. So it's unusually convenient. I can believe that. I've seen other people do something similar with like a SQLite database, and it oftentimes works rather well. I'm trying to remember, is LightDB a SQL or NoSQL based setup? It's NoSQL, right? Yeah, which means you can probably just dump everything in and it works great. Yeah, I came across this when people were looking for alternatives to SQLite at one point. I've not had any opportunity to use it in a project, but I remember it being on the list of options we were considering. Because this having Linky style support over it is just awesome. And then of course anything in C# is just great. That is another option as well. And we will see in a little bit, if you wanted to use iConfiguration as an abstraction into that so that your code didn't need LightDB, that would be an option as well. Because we're going to end up writing a little provider in a moment. Okay. So we are going to add settings and then, add options. And then what we want to do is actually tell the iConfiguration where are the values for this going to come from. So that would be the bind, and then we're going to go with our host context. So recall that this is the first parameter from up here. It has access to an iConfiguration. Let's see, iConfiguration, and then we're going to call it get section. So The whole reason for writing that earlier stuff before of iterating over IConfiguration is just showing that's where the data comes from. It's really most important for doing this binding up front. So in our case, the section in question that we care about is called settings. So we will just put that there. Do that, and I think that's all we need. Fire this up real quick. And you'll note now, when we hit our constructor, what is it saying? Missing value, something or another? I don't know. Reload? Settings value, something is weird. So I'm going to just do this here. Var settings gets settings dot ooh is a much better name. Reload and nope. Okay, we're gonna relaunch. I think the historical debugger just got all kinds of confused when I did that. Cannot dynamically because grumble. Because one of us made it a record type. It was so bloody convenient until it wasn't. So we'll do this. Boom. Do this. Public. Let's see. Get set. Okay, this is actually a question that came up with several colleagues 2 days ago. When you have a POCO, so a plain old C# object like this, and you have nullable reference types turned on, which I do in this project, or if you're on .NET 6, they're on by default. I want to declare this as non-nullable because I know that there's always going to be a value. And this one particularly came up in the idea of entity framework, where the POCOs were used to represent rows in a database table. And the column in the database is non-nullable. Therefore, when I read the POCO out of EF, I know that value will always that value will always be present, even though there's nothing. Even though I may set it as nullable. The problem is there's a little bit of a catch-22 here. The nullable reference type is not designed to reflect what you know at runtime. It's designed to reflect what is known at compile time. And so you are always going to get a warning. And I have, my personal rule is if it's serializable, it's nullable. And to date, I have not seen a counterexample of it. I'm sure somebody will find one. But I think it's probably pretty safe to say as a general rule, if it's serializable, it's nullable. And it's really hard to come up with a case where it's not possible to be null. So in this case, this is definitely serializable. So let's try this again. And I think this time around, it'll probably do a little better. Hey, look at that. And it read the values out. So don't use a record as your settings type. It doesn't work well. Or at least use a record with a default constructor and make sure to do your auto properties on it. I suppose that would work too. Here, proof is in the pudding. We'll declare it as record class. Worth noting, when records were first added, you didn't have record class, you just had record. But when they added record struct, they also allowed record class to exist. It is identical to just omitting the word class. This is completely superfluous. However, given that there are now more than one type of record, it's usually recommended to always say record class rather than just record by itself. But you'll note the only advantage by doing that is now we pick up the benefits of records. We've got a nice 2-string implementation now that just shows us all our properties. I've got nice equality members built up. Huzzah. Woo! Okay, so that gets us there. Okay, so quick recap. We can set up our view models with iOptions classes. We can structure our settings inside of JSON files in nice, pretty ways. If you wanted to do this same sort of hierarchy with environment variables, this would actually, as an environment variable, this would end up being settings __ value would get you this one. So because environment variables are inherently just name values, they aren't anything fancy. And actually, I think we can show that if I have a, might have to do it through the, I don't have a launch settings. Pretty sure we can do it in here. Debug, launch profiles UI, environment variables. So if we come in here and do settings, we'll do __ value. We'll launch this, and then environment variables. So settings __ value. Let's see. From env. If I save that, there's my launch settings. That's all I wanted. That's all I wanted. Okay. So if we fire this guy up. Oh, did I turn off my breakpoint? Well, if you turn off your breakpoint, you don't stop at the breakpoint. That's not helpful. That doesn't help anyone. So you'll note now our value here. Whoop, didn't catch it quick enough. Let's try that again. Okay, locals window it is. Boom. Our value here now shows from env. And the only reason it does that is because the providers that are added in order start off with the JSON file. So it's appsettings.json, appsettings.environment, which in our case is always production.json, then environment variables. So the environment variables get to supersede it. So because we added an environment variable, that's now overriding what we had here, which can be quite a convenient way of doing this. And again, you can clear these, reorder them, do whatever you need to. If you wanted to manipulate them, right inside of here is where you would do it with configuration builder, or is it host builder? One of you guys, host builder context, has the providers. Configuration builder, providers. Why am I confused? One of these guys has the list of them in here. Should be the latter. It might just be hidden from me. Oh, sources. There it is. So if you wanted to clear one, add one, remove it, reorder them, you can do what you'd like. The default is just in that particular setup. And it's worth noting that for all of this IConfiguration stuff that I'm showing here, this is exactly as it works in ASP.NET Core. So if you're doing web-related stuff, this probably seems remarkably familiar, but it doesn't have to be related to ASP.NET Core. Any C# app where you use the generic host, you can get all of this behavior just by doing this kind of setup, which is great. We can get all of the awesomeness beyond everything else. Because ASP.NET Core, oftentimes what people don't realize, isn't much fancier than a framework built on a console app. That's all it really is. It's a really cool framework with lots of stuff, but that's all it is. And so because we now have gotten into this wonderful state where there's kind of one .NET with .NET 5 and .NET 6, all of the stuff that we get to love on one framework, we can just pull those bits in and use them elsewhere, which is awesome. Awesome. Been learning to love ASP.NET at my job. See, that's what I love to hear, Metal Slug. That is awesome. I assume you're on ASP.NET Core, given that you're saying that you're loving it. I'm assuming it's Core, probably 3 or later, I'm guessing, because that's when I feel like I got really good. Yeah, 3.0. Yeah, about the 3.0 time frame, I think, is when it got really good. Because they initially did .NET Core, and the initial release was a little rough. They smoothed over a lot of the rough edges in like the 2x range. And then when they hit 3x, things started to get a lot nicer. And then 5.0 and 6.0 came with a lot of changes, but a lot of it wasn't like groundbreaking, shaking stuff. It was the cool new stuff was all around like language features for C# and a lot of performance, huge performance increases in 5 and 6. Okay, so options in there. Okay, so I promised something about secrets when I started. So darn it, we're going to do something with secrets, because secrets happen all the bloody time, and very often they are forgotten about, and because people often deem them as hard, they just get checked in. Please, 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 please do not do that. Okay, so let's start with the stupid simple option. Stupid simple option. So where is the secrets option? Manage user secrets. That's the button. And then conveniently Visual Studio goes, hey, would you like the NuGet package and all of the required setup? Yes, write all the code for me, please. And it should have... I don't know why it does this. I ran into this problem earlier today. I don't know if it's a bug in my Visual Studio or the fact that I'm not on the expected project type, but it doesn't do the right thing. Boo! Okay, specifically, it doesn't go and add the NuGet package. So we're going to go out and get the NuGet package ourselves. So something, 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 secrets. Boom, that one. And let's not grab a pre-release. So yeah, in general, you can just do a quick search and just kind of going down by download numbers. The one with 182 million, yeah, that's the one you want. Just from sheer download numbers. Wait, is there it has an update? Do I need to update a package? Oh, look at that. There's a new release there. Yeah, sure, why not? Let's grab that too. We'll grab that. See, this is the beautiful thing about semantic versioning. When you see the minor version there, you can be fairly confident that it only contains things that are bug fixes, and there should be no breaking changes. For people not familiar with semantic versioning, semver.org. This is something, if you're building libraries specifically, this is important to do. If you are building apps do not necessarily need to follow semantic versioning. And yes, assuming people follow it correctly. That is a very good point. A lot of people don't. The Microsoft libraries do, thank goodness. Okay, secrets. And the reason to follow it is because if people know that you're following it, it ends up making upgrades a lot easier. So you'll note it was a whole lot easier for me to just adapt and say, yes, please. Okay. Now I've got the user secrets guy added in. Huzzah. Now we'll manage user secrets. There we go. That's what we're looking for. Okay. So you'll note here, it gave me a secrets.json. The other change that it made is inside of my CS proj, you'll note it randomly generated a GUID and set it as its user secrets ID. So if we build our app now, I think I'm going to go with, I normally show off, oh, see, I already have it open. I normally show off dnspy, but dnspy has been archived with no indication that it's going to continue on, which doesn't make me happy. So if you look at your compiled application, when that user secrets ID, so 2CE, CA, something or another, when your application gets compiled, it gets turned into an assembly attribute. So there's now something in my compiled code with that same GUID. Now, why is that important? Because down here, back in our app.xaml, we can tell it to use that as a configuration source. So if we go configuration builder, let's see, was it add user secrets? Secrets. Find it. Boom. Thank you. And then you'll note it wants an ID, so you could either type in your GUID manually, but that's a lot of work, and I don't want to type in GUIDs because I don't hate myself. But if I just grab my type and feed it the assembly, What it will then do is it will look at the assembly, say, okay, go into the assembly, look for that assembly level attribute, and read the GUID. Why is that useful? Well, these secrets.json files, if you just right click on it and hit open containing folder, all this thing is doing when it does user secrets, this is just a really fancy JSON provider. That's it. It's not any more advanced than that. So what it ends up doing is creating this secrets.json inside of a user secrets folder, and you'll note that GUID shows up again. That's it. So if you have multiple apps, as you can see, I've got at least several, occasionally I will clear stuff out of here, that are using the GUIDs, this is where they all are. And I'm not going to open those up because I can almost guarantee that the files in there contain things that I should probably not show on stream. As much fun as it is to go and cycle my keys for things. So if you want a quick and easy way to do secret management, this is a nice way to do it. Because one, you get nice IDE support inside of Visual Studio, but it is just a JSON file. Now, it's worth noting that this file was in my local user profile directory, or nested underneath my local user profile. So if I can get that, maybe I can do this. Boom. Yeah, that'll work. So you'll note underneath my user, underneath my roaming app data folder, so Microsoft user secrets. So this is just a local JSON file. Now, I don't know how many people are like me, but I've got my desktop here that I use for streaming, but I also have a laptop as well. This can be mildly obnoxious when I am working on my desktop, push my repo, and then go and pull down it on my laptop, because then it's like, dang nabbit, what were those user secrets? And one option is you can legitimately just go and copy this file around. That's one option. And we'll get to that here in just a second. But let's start with this. So now that we've added user secrets, it's worth noting that when we call an add method in here, we're being added after the built-in ones. So before we had this value that was my awesome value that we then overrode with our launch settings from an environment variable, and now we've got a user secrets. So what we can do here is we can actually steal straight out of this. I'm gonna be lazy real quick. And then I'm just gonna delete the stuff I don't care about. Super secret local value. Okay, so we fire this guy up. And if we go look here now, you'll note, boom, oh, man, I gotta figure out a way to show that. There we go, locals. So you'll note now, this super secret local value has now overridden our environment variable because, well, we added our secrets provider last, so anything in our secrets file now gets to win. And you'll note this one is still coming from our base JSON file because no one's bothered to change it yet. There is, do I have a stray apostrophe in my JSON file? I do! Look at that. And that's what happens when you let stray characters float around. I joked with a colleague a few days ago, wondering how many developer hours have been wasted because of single character level mistakes. Because I know I've contributed my fair share of hours to that pool, and I'm sure most of you probably have as well. Feels horrible. Python. Okay. Okay, so there's that. So local settings are a great option. Or I should say local secrets are a great option when you want effectively to set up local secrets that you want to work with. And they're basically developer level stuff. The single white space that hurts so much. That sounds like the voice of experience, Robert. Let me find, because I had a wonderful. Oh, that is something I didn't show in here. Maybe we'll come back to that here in a minute, because I was going to show. I wanted to get all the way into some more interesting secrets. I think this is, yeah, this is the page. Okay, this is the guy. Okay, bum. And I'm gonna just clean up the link before I post it, so it's not quite as ugly. Boom, there. So there are a large number, and actually I should find the full link. There. Oh, no, I just saw it. Come back. There, that'll work. This one here. So there is actually, that's not the full list. Providers. There is a, no. This guy. That's more like what I'm expecting to see. Okay, so there are a lot of providers out there. So the basic ones that I think we've shown most of these. Basic file providers, environment variable providers, command line configuration provider, arbitrary in-memory configuration provider if you just want to feed it like a dictionary because you have a dictionary from some source, maybe you read it out of something. There are built-in support for those. So if you want a quick and easy way of using IConfiguration, and perhaps maybe you're storing your stuff in maybe a light DB and you've already read the thing out, but you'd like your code to be decoupled from that and going through a common like IOptions interface, you could simply use the memory configuration provider. All of these providers are either in the box with the configuration, or they are in their own NuGet package. This one, I believe, the memory one, I think is in its, yes, this guy is in his own NuGet package, it looks like. But you can feed it your arbitrary dictionary of stuff, and now the stuff just works, which is pretty cool. It is important to note that different providers have different ways of specifying hierarchy. Because there's a desire to have configuration be hierarchical, so like I want, this option contains this option, contains that all the way down. With JSON, it's easy. With things that are inherently string-based, there are always delimiter characters. The common ones are _, colon, or _. I think that covers, between those three, I think that will cover most of the configuration providers. And this, if you want a long read, this is the long read one. Boom. There's the long read one of all of the stuff. Now, it's worth noting, this one is specifically under the ASP.NET documentation. But again, we can pull in those NuGet packages. So even though this was built for ASP.NET Core, a lot of the stuff built for ASP.NET Core is usable elsewhere. Unless it's something that's like tied to HTTP or something, it's usually pretty simple to pull it in elsewhere. And configuration isn't webby by nature, so we just reference NuGet packages. Okay, so something. Where'd I go? Now, the one I want to get to, KeyVault. So, the problem I run into, and the problem that bit me earlier this week, is I had an app that was connecting to a third-party service. The third-party service, it was just a simple CLI app, nothing fancy. But to connect to the third-party services API, you had to pass a key. Fairly common. The problem is the repo is public. I obviously didn't want to check my key into a public repo. That would be bad. So I was like, well, let's just put it in the user secrets. Quick, easy, worked fine, great. Everyone was happy. The problem is because I've got multiple machines, and then it's like, well, I want to give somebody else access. And I was like, dang it. How do I effectively start to almost do secret level management of this? Because the secrets.json is not a great way to do it. And at the end of the day, this CLI app, I just publish it as a .NET Global tool. That's fine, wonderful. Here, I can keep talking about it, or I can just show it. It's not fancy. It's not fancy at all, and I'm actually in the process of updating it. So where I work, we use a app called. Oh, that's not where I want to go. Nope, I need to learn how to use a mouse. I apologize. So there's the repo. Where I work, we use a thing called Toggle to keep track of our time. It's just a simple way of doing timesheets because I work largely in a consultant type role. So we have to know how much time we spend working for various projects and clients so that we can bill them appropriately. So I am way too lazy to open their website. Yes, I am aware that they have apps that are wonderful and awesome, but I'm a developer and developers write code. So something had an API, I can write code, and I got this. So naturally what I did is I took, actually, hang on, Visual Aid. Total sidebar. So what I did to manage my timesheet, because that was a little too much effort, is I went through and I bought a little 9-key keyboard. I don't know if that's visible. Oh, some of my keys are green, so this is going to be interesting. You can guess which ones are green. The ones that are being chroma keyed out. So I bought this little 9-key. I took a 3D printer and printed custom keycaps. And this little 9-key it's programmable. So I programmed it to like upper function keys. So like F16 on up, or no, F13 on up. And then I used auto hotkey to map those key presses into invoking my CLI app, which calls Toggle to monitor my time entries. So then when I start work, I press button. And when I'm done working, I press button. It was a lot of work to just be able to press a button. And it felt so good when it worked. It felt great. So anyway, but to invoke Toggle's API, you have to have an API key. What a shock. And so obviously, I did not check my API key into this repo. You are free to search for it. It is not there. You'll note this is just a console application. It takes it in. This is leveraging something called the Dragon Fruit from System Command Line. And if it's not passed in, it'll just pull it off an environment variable. And this worked good, except for I ended up needing to cycle my key. May have exposed it when I didn't mean to, which was fine. Got it cycled, got a new key, but then I had to then go and populate it everywhere where it was used. And that just didn't work well for me. And so I wanted to have a more convenient way of sharing that. All of this to say, enter KeyVault. So I started refactoring this to use IConfiguration, similar to how all of this is set up. I was like, man, it'd be really great if I had another provider to be able to pull this in, because having a centralized level of configuration and policy would be great. And I don't want to just expose this key to anybody. I want to be very much in complete control of this. Well, conveniently, Azure has a resource that's intended to be used to monitor secrets and not expose them, which is awesome. So I went through, as soon as I figure out where I put it, on one of my tabs, I made a KeyVault. So this was not fancy. This was legitimately me just walking in and going, okay, I need a KeyVault. And here I can show you what I did. So create a resource. We do KeyVault. Also, if anybody, so Azure free account. I can't remember if KeyVault is on the list. Was that the Azure one? Nope, that's Google's. This is the one. I cannot remember if KeyVault is in the free services list or not. See all free services. That's what I'm looking for. Is KeyVault in here? A, B, C, D, E, F, G. KeyVault. So it is not permanently free, but if you sign up for a free account, it's at least free for the first 12 months for 10,000 transactions, which is frankly a lot, especially if you're on something that you're just using yourself. So worth noting, if you want to do something like this beyond the 12 months, it will probably cost you something. I can tell you my KeyVaults that I run for things like this, I'm pretty sure my cost is in the pennies, but my user base is in the 2 digits. So not exactly a huge user base. And it's low 2 digits too, I will say that. So, came in here, KeyVault, create. Oh, hush now. Picked a resource group, gave it a KeyVault name. The one thing to be aware of, because KeyVaults are addressable on the internet, there's a URL that gets generated for them, which we'll see in a second. This name has to be globally unique, which is why I didn't want to delete and rename it, just in the off chance somebody else decided to take the name Color Kraken from me while it was not there. So I kept it. Once I got it, I'm like, I'm not letting go of this name. It's mine. It's mine. So I stole Color Kraken, and so this is the URL that it ends up generating for you. And then you can set up soft delete, all that stuff. The one thing to note here, and this is a big change, the default is vault access policy. I do not recommend this one. This is the older one. The newer one is RBAC, or role-based access control. This is much nicer. This is typically what you're going to want, and that's what I'm going to show here. So we're going to leave because we'll just show networking. The other thing is, if you want it accessible via a public IP address, you do need to explicitly pick that option. If you do something else, it's private, and then does not work well for desktop apps. So if you want it to work with desktop apps, you do need a public IP address to gain access to it, or you have to front it with something instead. But I will leave complicated options up for other people. So create a KeyVault, and this guy should be in the more or less default state after you create it. And the key thing I'm going to point out right away is I'm going to click on secrets. Now, this is created underneath my Azure subscription where I am the owner. So I should have unlimited rights to all the things. But you'll note as an owner, I am not authorized to view these contents. This is both the best and the worst thing about KeyVault. KeyVault is secure by default, sometimes to a fault. It will not give you access to your own stuff unless you explicitly give yourself access. So as an owner, I can change my access level, but I don't get it by default. So, and this is why we picked, rather than the access policies, you'll note down here, we're still using it's set to RBAC rather than the vault access policy. RBAC gives you also more fine-grained control as well, which is even better. So we're going to come in here and we just need to grant access to this resource. So the big button that says grant access, yeah, we're going to click that. And then at least on the basic AAD level tier that I'm on, there's a bunch of built-in roles. The more advanced ones, you can create custom roles if you really need to fine-grain it better. But you'll note there's various different levels between who can, say, read the secrets, who can add the secrets, who can manage the KeyVault but not access them. So you'll know a lot of these, like the secrets officer can perform any action on the secrets of a KeyVault except manage permissions. Okay. The KeyVault secrets user, this one can only read secrets, which is good. In my case, I'm just going to go with, let's give me a secrets officer, because my owner permissions will give me, well, no, I want to be able to show the KeyVault administrator. We're just going to give myself all the things. So, not managed identity, and then I would like me Pretty please. My account. Let's see. Review and assign. Me. Note your OID or object ID. So 414F. Review and assign. We're going to give me access real quick. Boom, boom, boom. Also worth noting, occasionally when you grant access, you may, so I'm going to stall for just a couple moments because occasionally it does take a few minutes to, go back, to come all the way in. Yeah, so this operation is not allowed by RBAC. If role assignment were recently changed, please wait several minutes for role assignments to become effective. They aren't joking about those several minutes. So we're going to just confirm that it does show me as a KeyVault administrator and that, yeah, perform all data plane operations, i.e. manage the data of your certificates, keys, and secrets. The secrets are what we care about. There we go. Oh, I went in. Oh well, we'll leave it. So, obviously the permissions are now valid again because I can now see the secret that's in there. But if we wanted to add a secret, we could come in here. Manual is just the easy way of doing it. And once again, these things are just name value pairs. The wonderful part about secrets is they can be versioned as well. And then if you click on one, you can actually give individual access. So on a per secret basis, if you wanted to say, I want to grant somebody access to this secret, but not this other one, you can do that. Which is something you cannot do with the access policies, which is kind of nice. Okay, so we've got this guy here. So let's go through and let's set up one for ours. So if we look back at our app settings, so you know, settings, value, my awesome value. So we're going to go and create this one because I believe where we left it is this guy is currently the one winning. So super secret local value. Which tab am I in? There we are. Okay. And as the other one implied, the magical naming scheme for hierarchy in KeyVault is the double hyphen. So this one's going to end up being settings, double hyphen value. So if, for example, I don't have internet, I won't be able to use your settings. Correct. And that's one of the things I'm going to address here in just a moment because this is great for one use case and horrible for another. So, and I will let you decide. So super secret, we'll do KeyVault value. We'll just make it different. You can even have keys expire, not activate until a particular point. So if you know, hey, I don't want this thing to become active until X, you can do that. There's a lot of power here. Okay, so we are just going to go create. We're going to keep it simple. Okay, so let's actually register up this provider now. So down in here, we need to get access to some stuff. So configuration builder, add KeyVault, VAULT. If I spell it correctly, I think the autocode can find the NuGet. No, it's not that cool. Okay. Well, that's just dumb. So, we need to pull in some stuffs. We need to grab, this is KeyVault. KeyVault, where is the add Azure KeyVault? That's the method I want. NuGet package you in. Well, here, we'll just do this. So let's go grab some NuGet packages. Because we're gonna need some stuff. Actually, I think we can just type in KeyVault. CQRS in your work, and is there a chance to see an overview and best practice of the technology from you on the stream? Ooh, so personally, what I have done with it is very limited. I'd have to do a little prep to be able to go through and do best practices. I do, however, work with people smart on that. I may see if I can con a coworker to come on stream and help me. Which that could be fun as well. Because I have people who know it much better than me, and that would potentially be a better option. Okay, so this is what we need. Microsoft Extensions Configuration, Azure KeyVault. We're going to start there. We need this guy. Oh, hush. Oh, hush. Just trying to add a KeyVault. Add Azure KeyVault. There's the magical method that we want. Okay. And there are some options in here. And more importantly, the first one is we need a vault. So, and actually we're going to put Azure KeyVault at the end. I can't decide. Yeah, we've been just appending things to the end. Okay, so let's grab, I need my vault URL. Go back here. Grab my vault URI. So that goes there. And I think this guy is not going to work for me out of the gate. Well, we're gonna fire it up. I'm fairly confident this blows up with auth issues. But I made a mistake earlier. Let's see if I can do it again. It'll think. This is the other reason why it can be mildly problematic. Oh, look at that. Is it just gonna work? See, I'm wrong again. Even better. Okay, so how unfortunate. It read the value out of the KeyVault for me. Look at that. So that was easy. And there wasn't a lot of thinking involved. Now, the reason this works. So, I am signed... you misspelled the key. Oh. Thank you, Roundup. As the lovely old saying goes, in programming, I don't have to spell accurately. I just have to spell consistently. Usually, but you're right. We should go fix that. So this will be a nice lesson in. Wait, what? Oh, that's the road. Okay, this is the one. I was like, that's not our string. Ah, there we are. We're gonna just copy that guy. Go back. You'll note you don't actually ever. You update the versions of your secret. So because these things are version, you don't just go in and edit it. You put in a new version. Why does that look wrong to me still? You can see spelling is not my strong suit. Okay. We'll go with it then. Yeah, sure, create. So now we have a new version. Worth noting, you can't, so this URL here, if you ever used like the KeyVault, thank you, Robert. Hang on, spelling bad, Mountain Dew good. There, little Mountain Dew covers over many a spelling mistake. If you do use the KeyVault APIs or go through the SDK directly, you can get access to secrets at particular versions. So these magical GUIDs are actually useful. So if there's a reason that you want to pin yourself down to a particular one, that's how you do it. Okay, but the reason this works is because the account that I am signed into on my box is the same account that I have given access to. So the Microsoft Identity Provider knows who I am on this machine, therefore it is able to connect out into Azure. So because I am logged in locally, it works. Now, that's great. Let's prove it. So we're going to come in here. We're going to go IAM, and we're going to do role assignments. And we're just gonna kick me out because where's remove? There we go. So we're just gonna kick me out of the role assignment. Now, this is sort of what you were driving at earlier a little bit, Justin Bieber, of, well, what if I go offline or something goes wrong? Apparently I'm not out yet. Give it a moment. Give it a moment. Gotta get the KeyVault. I did this earlier. It fails, I promise. It doesn't just magically off its way through. Come on, kick me out of the KeyVault. There we go. That's more like what I was expecting. Caller not authorized. So you'll note you will get similar exceptions that bubble up. Obviously, it won't be caller not authorized if you are, say, offline or whatnot. I would throw airplane mode on to demonstrate that, but unfortunately, that would also kill the stream, and so that's probably a bad idea. Trust me, 404s or not connected from the internet will do other things. Now, this is the drawback to adding in a provider that is a remote resource, is if you cannot get out there, the provider is going to fail at the point where it's building up the IConfiguration. And the IConfiguration is built up as part of doing the app initialized with this build command here. So create host builder gets the builder ready. The build method actually takes the builder and says, okay, builder, now build the things. The builder goes to build the configuration. And when it gets around to KeyVault, it goes, yeah, about that. Boom. And we're done. Which is not great. Not great. That is not what we would prefer to have happen. So instead of doing that, what would be a little bit nicer is if we could tell it, hey, don't do that. Now, there's a few easy ways we could work around this. So if, for example, I wanted to just limit KeyVault to debug, just so I could share these between machines, I could do that. How to do air handling? Try, catch, wrap, everything kind of guy? Good question. So yes-ish. And that's actually one thing I haven't talked about yet. The generic host, one of the other wonderful things that it gives you is generic logging. So you can have your code set up to do it. So the one thing I most of the time hate is just try catch blocks that suppress exceptions. That is a great way to be very confused and frustrated at your app. It's working, but it's not working. Something's not right. In general, the idea of fail fast is usually a good thing. Having to blow up in spectacular ways as early as possible with useful information is typically my preferred approach. Now, with that said, with useful information is the most important point of any error, not necessarily whether it crashes. There's always an evaluation of, well, can my app continue reasonably if it errs at this point? Sometimes the answer is yes, sometimes it's no. But in general, yeah, try catch, usually try catch log or try catch append useful information and rethrow. In your catch statement, or just catch the exception and output that. So oftentimes what I will do inside of and actually, let me circle back to that in just a second, because we're about to handle this KeyVault error. So let me handle that, and then I'll answer that then. I think that'll be a little easier. So we could wrap this in an if debug and just tell developers on the app, hey, do this. What I would actually prefer to do is tell it, you know what, if you don't, because not everybody's going to have access to Azure KeyVault. More importantly, if you aren't me or somebody I've added to my subscription, you aren't going to have access to my KeyVault. So this is great for some of us and not great for others. But the idea eventually is, so grand aspirations, is that this app eventually kind of has a means of people to be able to share their themes amongst each other, which would be great. But that requires things like auth, because I'm not going to let that work unauth. That sounds horrible. And some way to manage that data, because I could easily see people using it and then just blowing up my Azure subscription. That also sounds bad. So we're going to not let that happen, which is why I want to start building out some back-end bits for this app along with KeyVault and the secrets. So that's long-term where I'm thinking of going. But this, for now, what we need to do is handle the failure when we don't have access to KeyVault, because that will happen. So if we take a look at what this method is doing, you can just control click in. So Visual Studio 2022, I believe, uses the same SDK as ILSpy, so the same thing as this guy for getting your decompiled source. So you don't know, this one just calls the overload that so for whatever reason, this thing here is not landing on the right overload, because that shows 3 parameters and I see 1 getting passed, so that's not right. So this one lands here, it hits the options overload, which is this bottom one down here. And if we look at this bottom one down here, we can see this does a bunch of stuff, but ultimately at the end of the day, all it's doing is calling configuration builder add, and then specifically this internal class, this IConfiguration source, is really just a single method. So this whole extension method is just a means of calling add to add in one of these guys, and this guy ultimately adds in the provider. And this is what's doing a lot of the work in terms of building this stuff up. So what we would like to do, and we can look at this provider, maybe. There we go. And if I'm saving you the bunny rabbit follow. This is where it ends up going. So the load method is what does the work, but load legitimately just calls into load async. As you can see, this is their unfortunate way of turning an async call into synchronous, doing the best possible way they can. They try to do to avoid deadlocks. Not perfect, but probably close enough. This is the scary part with this type of code inside of a desktop app, because that's where deadlocks can occur. But in this case, I believe they're safe, just by virtue of usage. Anyway, we call into this load secrets, and the key part here is it calls in and says, okay, let's get all of the secrets, let's iterate through all of them, let's do some stuff, let's add them, let's build them up, and set all of these. So it does a whole bunch of spin multiple tasks, go read all the secrets, pull in all the configuration from the KeyVault. Great. That's what we want. This is ultimately the call that's ending up failing. So if we were to fire this guy up one more time and take a quick look at the stack trace. Thinking while it gets off. So if we hit view details here and then stack trace. So if we look through this guy here, KeyVault client extensions, there is the Azure KeyVault configuration provider, and then more specifically, we are inside of the load async method. For people not familiar with it, a couple streams back, we talked about the async and await and what the async keyword does when it recompiles your method with the state machine. This, when you see these kind of alligator angles with this pattern on the end with a move next, that's your state machine triggering. So if you're not familiar with that, a couple videos back, or I should say, should do this, not this. Link to YouTube streams there. It'll come up, I promise. So this load async, ultimately, if we want to do a try catch, this is what we want to wrap. The problem is our injection point isn't going to be, there's not a great one built up here, because we can't try catch as part of the builder, because this is setting it up, not actually running of it, because the running of it is happening in this build. And we don't want to just try catch the entire build, because we ultimately need the iHost to get built. What we'd like to do is on the KeyVault provider, grab just that and replay and say, if there's any error with the KeyVault, let's just ignore them. We don't care. Let's get rid of it. So what we are going to do is we are going to replace this code here. So we're going to start with this, because you'll note this class here is internal, which is unfortunate because we need it. So we're going to grab it. And we are just going to copy pasta that guy. Yeah, so stop. Why are you not file scoped? File scope namespace. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so we will make our own class and we will call it, I just want to disambiguate a little bit. We're going to do that. Bring in you. I think that gets me most of the way there. I need to put the word my in front of this. And that should fix that. That should fix that. I'm going to move you to your own file so I don't have to think about you. And then down here. And then what is your problem? Provider is inaccessible. Of course it is. Your KeyVault configuration provider. Oh, really? That is really, really unfortunate. Oh, you are going to be a pain in the neck, aren't you? Because I would really, really like to derive from you. How did I do this earlier? Let's see. I got access to you earlier, and I went... Oh, did I go through a different NuGet package? Is that what I did wrong? Yeah, I'm cheating. I have sample code, which is the proper way to do this. What did I do? I wrote my own configuration provider to get me into here, because ultimately all I needed was this guy. But you are unfortunately going to be problematic for me, aren't you? Yeah. Let's see here. So then if I don't get access to that, I really just want to pull from you, don't I? Let me just look, because I think you're a pretty simple. We might end up having to wrap this in a fun way to get around this KeyVault client wrapper. I think we could get in this way. We could go in this way and get it with the KeyVault client, perhaps. Sorry, I'm trying to see what my code did before, and I think the difference is. Don't tell me. Oh, interesting. I pulled an older NuGet package earlier. Oh, that's exciting. That is exciting. Let's see, options client. I think what we can do is get at it a slightly different way, because we can come at it from here, I believe, and wrap it there. That should work, because that comes in from KeyVault client. I assume you get defaulted. Let's see, KeyVault secret manager gets set in a constructor. I'm just finding my way through these. KeyVault client, please don't be sealed. Public class, sweet. I think that's all I need. So I would just like to wrap you up. So this provider is just doing a wrapper, and the wrapper is assume public. Interesting. Why do you not give me another injection point? So one other thing I will call out that I didn't show earlier was a lot of these providers do have the I options interface is only one way of getting these values backed out. You know, you'll note that this KeyVault has a reload interval, because once your app is running, quite often you don't want the app to just stick with the configuration value that it was at startup. It would be nice if that would refresh as things changed, at least within some reasonable interval. That's exactly what this is for. So if you want your app effectively pulling KeyVault on some interval to check for updated values, that's the thing there. Similar things with the file providers. They can use watchers to watch for when your JSON files change and automatically update. The key part is your code beyond iOptions needs to leverage, what is it? So there's iOptions snapshot, which will give you a snapshot in time. I believe iOptions, based upon when you call the dot value, that's when it's actually going to read it. So as long as you are repopulating and not caching the result of that dot value call, you should be fine. This may end up being a little more complicated. Okay, so before I run down a quick rabbit hole, let me answer the question about the catching. So inside of, I should say, as a generalized rule with a try catch, and I'll just do it up here, right? So there are a few common things that I see happen all the time that people should not do. So in general, if you are you should only catch exceptions that you actually intend to handle. And I use handle kind of loosely because there's a couple ways that can be interpreted. So one is you catch the exception and you actually do something with it. For example, and I'm intentionally not using logging here. Like perhaps I know that an IO exception in some particular context is fine and we just need to suppress it. You know, it could be any number of reasons. We've lost access, the folder got deleted, something's wrong, right? The path doesn't exist. I know that IO exceptions, it's like, okay, I get it. The file I was going to read is not there. Let's just move on. We couldn't get it. Don't really care what the reason was. My app can keep working without reading some file. Sure, great. That is perfectly fine as a way of suppressing an exception. That works. The one thing that is generally frowned upon is generalized catch blocks, which are catch-all exceptions. And it's worth noting this is, in latest versions of C# identical as just catching everything. There used to be some minor differences with unmanaged code. Those are no longer the case in latest versions of C#. The other thing that you should never, ever, ever do is this. So, and you'll note the analyzers in Visual Studio 2022 are already even flagging it, saying rethrowing the caught exception changes the stack information. Because at the moment you do throw exception, this is valid for the case of when you do throw new exception or similar. Because this is what ends up setting the stack trace on the exception object. If you rethrow a caught exception, that redoes the stack trace, throwing away the original one. So the useful things that you can do in here is, for example, if I catch the exception, but it's like, you know what, catching this is not useful. I know something about the current context. So maybe I decide I'm going to wrap this up in an IO exception, or sure, an invalid operation exception. The one thing that you can do is I can say, you know, useful message with more context. So if for whatever reason I know something about the context, maybe I know that I'm reading a file line, right? And then that there, wrap it up. I do a catch-all when using multiple libraries that I'm not familiar with. I usually don't care about errors in production, only in debug. And that is probably fair. The hard part with exceptions is by definition they're exceptional, and they really have to be evaluated on a case-by-case basis. And so yeah, suppressing things that come out of libraries if the library is going to throw and your app can continue on reasonably in the face of a library, some call failing, that's fine. Right? It really does depend on, can your app continue on reasonably if some call fails? And the answer is, I don't know. It depends. It really depends a lot on context. But if I'm going to catch an exception, it should be to either append useful information, and by append, by usually wrapping it up in another exception. The other thing that is usually a big no-no is doing something like Pretend like console write line is a reasonable log method. Generally, console output is not how you want to log your exceptions. So this is also generally a bad idea of log the exception and rethrow it. This is usually because in this case you aren't actually handling it. You're logging it and then rethrowing it, and typically what will happen is either that exception will get thrown all the way up to the next catch block or all the way out and bring down the app. And at the point where it brings down the app, at least in Windows, like your event viewer is going to log something for it, or depending on what framework you're in, it may log something for it. And so this additional log is actually duplicating and usually showing less information because it's further down the stack than what the higher up one is going to do. So in general, if you catch an exception, don't just log and rethrow. That isn't necessarily a handled. Always make sure that you're either, like, if you're going to catch and rethrow, make sure you're like appending more contextual information. That's great. Please do that. I told some colleagues the other day, please write the error message that you want to read, because I got some really bad error messages coming up at me, and I'm like, this is frustrating. This is really, 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 really frustrating. Console write line EE message. Wait, what's the overload do there? I don't remember what the second overload to console write line is. Wait, what? Is that hitting just the format overload? I assume you must be in something like this. I don't know syntax. Yeah, so something like this. In general, don't worry about it. The only reason I question it on console write line is the overloads are a little, without IntelliSense. IntelliSense is making all of us dumber. It's like speed dial on cell phones. No one knows phone numbers anymore. That's what's happening to programming. We're slowly getting our version of speed dial. The overloads to write line, this is another. This is just a weird one because this is effectively a string format call, and because these things won't be format strings, you probably don't need both. Again, I'd probably have to see usage, because that's going to end up doing a replacement with, like your curly brace bit in there. Soon I'll forget how to code when Copilot is right there. Oh, it is. So Copilot and if you're not familiar with it, my new favorite thing in Visual Studio is IntelliCode. Where is it? IntelliCode. Boom. This. Oftentimes IntelliCode will show up when you start working in a solution. You'll see a little yellow bar at the top that says, hey, do you want to turn on IntelliCode suggestions? I always click yes. It's basically the Copilot for Visual Studio. And there are times where it is freakishly accurate. I mentioned last week on stream that some colleagues teach at a local university. I've been helping out, and I was teaching somebody some C#, and it's really unfortunate because I was explaining, okay, do this, and then this is what happens. They hit enter to drop down to the next line, and IntelliSense just populated the whole line. It's like, really? You're not going to make them learn anything? You're just going to hand it to them? Okay, fine. Yes, that's the right answer. Hit tab. Let's see. Console write line E get base exception to string. Helps a lot if you have a really big hierarchy. Oh. E dot get base exception. Do you mean flatten hierarchy? Because there's a get base. No, look at that. Oh, I see. Oh, gets the root cause. Yes. So this will get you. So like when you rethrow like this, where you're setting the inner exception, this happens a lot in the libraries all the way down. So get base exception is going to go to your innermost. If you there is one on, is it aggregate exception? I think has a flatten hierarchy as well. flatten. Yeah. This can be helpful. So there's a few different exception types that have little helpers like this, which can be quite handy specifically for logging. Don't do it just for the fun of it, because it's work that doesn't need to be done. If you write CS code in VSC, you can use Copilot. Yes. Yeah. I actually started using a lot more Visual Studio Code for generalized development, mostly because I was working in a very large solution. The other thing, and I'm just going to show this. Let's see. So, okay, I can't go the entire time without talking about GitKraken. So, where's CodeLens? Huh? Do I already have it installed? Must. Did I already install CodeLens? Installed CodeLens. No. Oh. No. GitLens. There we are. This guy. Oh, I haven't put it on this machine yet. Where's the share button? There's a share. Oh, hush. Go away. Go away. Go away. Where is the? Is it the copy extension ID? Let me see. Nope. There is a share button. Install another version. Where is it? They hide it at the bottom of the README or something? Visual Studio. No, there is. Well, when in doubt. There we are. That'll work. Boom. There's a link. So GitLens is bought by GitKraken, and there was a question they had on their Twitter the other day about, what do people want to know about it, or what was the thing? It was something like, what did you wish you knew when you started with it, or something like that. And I was like, I haven't even installed it. I went and installed it. It's pretty nice. It's pretty nice. So, let's see. Make sure to sorry, I missed some context. Aggregate has flattened. Oh yes. So the question about the subtle difference between throw and throw E. Yeah, I kind of skimmed over it very quickly. But the key difference here is, so the two lines. This one good, this one bad. And so the key difference is the moment you do throw space exception instance. So so similar to what we did here, because new exception instance. This sets the stack trace of the exception object, and building up that stack trace is actually kind of expensive. It's the most expensive part of, well, not the most expensive. It's a fairly expensive part of throwing exceptions, which is why you should not use them for normal control flow. Exceptions should be for exceptional cases. But if you catch an exception and rethrow it like this, what you've done is you've replaced the original stack trace with a stack trace that starts from right here. So you've thrown away all the useful stuff. Well, not all the useful stuff. You've thrown away arguably what I consider to be the most useful part of an exception, which is, where did it come from? How did I get there? Like that, the stack traces, I love stack traces. I love debugging from them. I'm weird. I don't know why. I actually enjoy when I get bug reports that are just, hey, here's the exception from the logs, figure out what happened. And I love that kind of, almost deductive reasoning of, well, it had to have done this because of this, and it got here because of this. Sometimes there's not enough information, but I love it when you can kind of deduce your way all the way into a solution. Mwah. Love that feeling. This here will properly rethrow the exception without rewriting the stack trace. And I'm a little surprised because when I did this the first time, I thought, it must have been when I did this. Yeah, there it is. Okay. it's surprising to me that this one appropriately flags and this doesn't. I'm a little surprised at that. But at least in this particular case, it is appropriately, the code analysis is flagging it, saying, hey, this is a bad idea. So in general, you should almost never do throw exception instance, except in the case when you are first newing up the exception. That's the general case of the only time it's acceptable to do throw exception instance. Is when you're first doing it, because you kind of somebody has to do the first throw somewhere. Ooh, default theme. Like I said, so small confession point. VS Code for a long time has been my text editor of choice, and I honestly have not used it for a lot of development. Recent project, I was doing a lot of SRE related work, so a lot of PowerShell scripting. And so I started to get myself back into it more. The one thing I will say VS Code has absolutely rocked on, that Visual Studio is only slowly catching up on, is their multi-cursor support. It is awesome. I had a colleague start teaching me a lot of the shortcuts and how to use the multi-cursors effectively. Oh my word, it is amazing. I wish Visual Studio was up on that par. Exceptions and asynchronous methods are also handled differently, aren't they? Yes, but I'll put a little star next to it. So if you have done the async keyword on your method, and properly awaited all of your asyncs all the way down, the exceptions bubble up from your perspective in the exact same way as if it was all synchronous. So, which is actually kind of complicated when you think about it, considering each of those asynchronous methods were, okay, this ran on something else, then came back, this ran over here, came back. It moves around a lot. The async and await state machines keep track of that, and that's one of the things that they do, is make your exceptions bubble up nicely for you. So they bubble up as though they were synchronous and normal, and you don't have to think about it, which is great. The one case that's really important to keep track of, so specifically because we are in WPF land, I think we got rid of them. Don't think we had them in here. So cases where you might do, so for example, where you have like a task.run, you want to be careful, because you can actually end up having exceptions get swallowed when you have them spun off in different things. Because when an exception bubbles up, there's only a couple options when it gets to the top. It can either be swallowed or bring down your application. For things like, here we've got a good one, async void. In the cases of like async void or task.run, you want to be explicit and make sure that you are handling those exceptions, because oftentimes those ones will bubble up, they'll hit the top, they'll jump to the global exception handler, and at that point your app is crashing. The global exception handler is mostly there as a means for you to log it before you go down, because you're going down. So worth noting that is something that's worth to do. It seems they wrap in inner exception. It can. It depends a little bit on your call stack on how things are going to get wrapped. But so for example, where's an await? I've got an await in here. So theme manager safe theme. So for example, if we do try, right, catch exception E, and then we will properly rethrow, because we will be good little citizens. And if we jump in here, go to implementation, we're going to actually go, so you'll note this is a callback delegate inside of here. We're just going to throw new exception, something like that. And then I'm going to go and turn you off. I'll have to come back to that KeyVault thing because I do want to wrap it in a exception handler. Okay, and then get rid of you for the moment, and then this should start. So we should be able to see this happen. So this is anytime the brush gets updated. So we'll just go and update a brush real quick, and oh right, don't need you. Launch and go. And I don't know why this breakpoint is here, so we're going to get rid of it. Okay. So if we go and update a brush, it should blow up rather than update. Apply. Okay. So you'll note we caught the exception here. And in this particular case, let's see if we grab our locals. So you'll note this is actually not even wrapped in an inner exception. So I've got just a regular system exception. The message on it is in fact I'm sorry. Oh, look at that. Nope, it is wrapped in an inner exception, but I think this one is me because I'm pretty sure both of these. Yeah, so you'll know inner exception, Misa going boom. Outer exception is error writing theme file. And I'm pretty sure that just means I appropriately wrapped an exception. So in write theme, oh, look at that. I did do that. So in write theme, I catch the exception from the callback. So this is being thrown inside of the callback from here. So this exception throws, gets caught here, gets wrapped as an inner exception, and then rethrown. This bubbles all the way up back to here where it is caught, and we can then take a look at it. So in general, it won't be wrapped in an inner exception unless something does it. But there are a lot of things that do it. So it is very possible, depending on which APIs you're going through, that things will get wrapped up. Like, for example, if you do a wait on like a task when all, because that has that's a fan out approach where there's going to be multiple tasks executing. Any number of those could be throwing exceptions. Those ones you'll often see get wrapped up in like an aggregate exception in an effort to bubble those things up that way. So that API is going to most likely throw aggregate exceptions back at you, not the actual original exception that was thrown. So it does depend a lot on the call stacks of those, whether they get wrapped up. The nice part though, once again, stack trace, what I view as the most important thing ever, is I can see exactly where these things came from. So I can tell at the current point that I'm at, I am in the updated received, but I can also know that, oh, this exception was thrown inside of the write theme method down on theme manager line 171. So I have line numbers because this is my code and the symbols files was able to resolve it. And I can figure out what method I was in. And even without the line number, quite often you can start to figure out based on the exception details. So usually the type of exception in the message and the method, I can usually get pretty close as to what happened. Maybe not why it happened, but usually what. What is usually pretty easy to figure out. But then we can go to the inner exception and say, okay, well, we know that one happened. And so this one has a much shorter stack trace because this was done in the callback of save theme. So you can kind of start to divine that it was done in a callback because of this prefix here. A lot of when the compiler generates code, oftentimes when you see these angle braces, the reason it does that is so that the stuff that it generates doesn't accidentally have a name collision with some of your code. Because outside of you doing something really, really interesting, this is invalid C# syntax. It's valid IL, but it's invalid C#. So it's really hard for you to already have a method with this name on it because it's invalid C# syntax. So it means the compiler's pretty safe that it's not going to accidentally name collide. So it just, as long as it makes sure it doesn't name collide with itself, it's golden. So, but because this one was thrown from save theme down on 134, was caught in the very next method in write theme right above it, and then that one wrapped the exception and popped it up. And so we can, just between those two stack traces, we can start to divine a little bit about what happened. So if that answers that question. Okay, I'm a little disappointed that I feel like I'm going to end again on a note where I didn't actually finish up what I was wanting to do with the KeyVault. Okay, I want to take one more look at this real quick and make sure, because I do actually want to get this code added to the repo. Not this code, this code doesn't need to be added. But I would like to add something like this, because again, my long-term goal is to be able to have some auth stuff added, and I would like to be able to grant, I'd like to have the separation between a regular user and like an admin, because if I allow people to upload their own themes, I also want to be able to have admins that can say moderate and delete, which requires setting up some authorization and all of that, or I should say authorization and authentication. This guy comes in here, all this is doing is setting the string, which is getting the token provider callback, which is setting up a KeyVault client. I'm kind of just wondering if I could grab this options class, wrap the KeyVault client in my own, and be done with it. My brain goes, this would just be so much easier on a website. I know. You're not wrong. There's a long-standing debate about, are desktop apps dead? Should everything just move to the web? And usually my standard answer is desktop apps aren't dead. The web has just greatly expanded what its capabilities, and so it's quickly going through and building stuff out. Which is totally fine. I get it. The only advantage my little WPF app has over a web-based one is some of its file interaction stuff. But even then, there's another. I don't know where I saw that URL. There's another Get Kraken ambassador who's actually building a very similar app as a website. And specifically on his, he's already got a kind of like a gallery view where people can post things and download different ones that they want, which is cool. Which is very cool. But I also like thick client apps, so I have to build something. Oh, hello, hang on. This is you going straight through an HTTP client. Yeah. And that's usually the argument for better utilization of hardware is usually, I think, right now where people end up drawing the line between, do I build a website or do I build a desktop app? Because if, for example, there's a project I did a lot of work on with my company that does like video editing type stuff. And that's one that, though there's a desire to put some components of it in the web, it really has to remain a desktop app for at least the foreseeable future. There's just no way that web-based stuff, like when you start throwing in, 40 gig video files, it's just gonna fall over as a web-based one versus something that has a lot better control of the hardware. So things like that, I don't foresee ever changing, especially being a desktop app. We can do things like take advantage of GPU encoding and all kinds of other fun stuff. So there's certain areas where it's where you definitely just where you do need it, but the web, for what most people do, which is a lot of like enterprise move data around stuff, it's not advanced stuff, which is why I think the web has taken over so much space. To data fine, but still would have to make a desktop app in the back end. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, the only thing I'm noticing here is I'm noticing they exposed the HTTP client. And I know a thing or two about an HTTP client, and I'm just trying to see if there's a clean way, because all I want to do is grab the exception from it. Oh, yeah. There she is. There's the message handlers. Okay, so do you expose a clean way for me to just set a message handler? I'm a little annoyed that my sample that I put together that I thought I was going to show is on such an old NuGet version. Otherwise, I would just show it. It's just on a old enough version. I don't think I don't want somebody seeing that code and doing something stupid like copying it. Because the options class here only exposes me the client. So I can get access to one of these. And this guy itself is going to, here, let's just do this from the other side rather than coming at it this way. So I just, what was the options? I want one of these. So if I go, oh, for fun, it is possible to make this code compile. Don't do it, but it's possible. Okay, quick shameless plug. That's not it. Where is it? No, it's not that far back. It's not that far back. Where are you? There is, oh, it's that's why I'm on the wrong YouTube channel. I'm on mine. This one. This video. So, shameless plug, if you want to know how to make that code compile, there's the link. Don't recommend it. That video is pretty much a conglomerate of how many bad ways can I just horrendously abuse C#. Filled with me giggling, which is another good reason to avoid it. Okay, so there's the vault, there's the reload interval, there's the client. And then on here, what I would really love to do is manipulate your underlying HTTP client. Crypt with HTTP. There's the handlers, there's the HTTP client. Oh, it's so close. It's so close. So HTTP client, you can get access under the hood to its handlers, but you do it through its constructor. There's a great, let's see. There is a great blog that I had on doing so, which is why I'm looking to see if there's an easy way into this. Because I could grab, oh man, it's so close, it's so close. Sign in with HTTP messages async. Oh, it's so close. I think I'm gonna end up having to derive from that just to wrap it, because I want to set the HTTP client, and this doesn't give me direct access to do that. because it exposes the handlers for me, which is great. But doesn't quite give me... Yeah, because I'd love to get a hold of this HTTP pipeline, grab the exception that's thrown when it invokes the KeyVault, and then suppress the exception and move on. That would be the ideal situation. And this guy certainly allows for something like that. It just doesn't allow it from the point where I have access to it, which is here. I almost wish this was... Normally I don't prefer interfaces, but I almost wish there was something a little cleaner here. Why are you not able to decompile into there? You opened it before. Okay. Oh, is it because it's already open? That Visual Studio. You should know the difference there. I'm just trying to make sure there's not some simple handler to get access to it. But this guy here clearly exposes the handlers. So in the event that I want to get at it, I can certainly grab and come around. Oh, thank you, Nightmare. Welcome to the stream. Can I ask you to do my project? You can ask. I reserve the right to decline. It depends. What is the project? And then more importantly, is this a homework project? I'm not opposed to helping people, but I usually get a little twitchy if it looks like a homework project. School project. I guess the question is, what is the project and what are you struggling with on it? How do I send the PDF? Hey, look. 1 second. I will. If you want, yeah, got it. If you want to, Nightmare, there is my various links. You can send it to me. Like I said, I do get very twitchy about homework assignments because I do teach at a university as well, so I run into all kinds of fun ones with students at times. I'm happy to guide and give direction, but if you're looking for somebody to just do the homework, I'm not the right guy. People need to learn, and I am happy to help guide in that regard, but I'm not the one who's going to hand out answers. Okay, so it looks like this is going to end up being an obnoxious wrapper for it. Yeah, teach them how to do it. Don't do it for them. Yes, completely agree. There's actually a class right now that some colleagues are teaching at the local university that's all on the basics of C#. I've heard the phrase before, those who can't teach, and it's really a horrible thing, because my opinion is that by the time you're able to teach somebody else the answer, or teach somebody else a topic, you probably know it pretty well. Okay. I will say this: I'm already a little twitchy since the first word in the PDF is the word confidential. Okay, so the assignment is, and I'm a little hesitant to drag this thing onto screen simply because it has the word confidential at the top. So I will summarize briefly. The objectives are create an interface with appropriate configurations according to the requirements, select appropriate data to capture information, apply appropriate control structure and control flow of execution to the requirements, manipulate data flow between the process of information according to the requirements. The objectives are unusually ambiguous. Got it. Though the screenshots in here seem to be rather helpful. So this is a console level application, and it looks like largely designed to teach some of the basics. Can't understand my lecture's explanation. Okay. Well, that I am happy to try and explain on. So just want to make sure I understand what's going on here. So okay, and I'm going to pull up a few other docs pages that might be there are, so this is largely let me see if I can get this going. There is a can't find the relevant links for dummies. That's what I'm trying to see if I can find here real quick for you, because there are some good okay, so I think okay, I'm legit below average in the class. So this is okay, so I'm gonna start throwing some links out, but I will warn you, explanation coming. So this Microsoft Learn has been putting together a lot of this, and a good portion of this assignment is just around basics of C#. I'm guessing that this is probably it's probably below a 300 level class. I'm imagining. I don't know exactly what it is. So far it's English. The one thing I wanted to find on here, because there's a great one, and I'm looking for this. Continue. Okay, perfect. These ones here are probably, depending on how far into C# you are, you may want to try these out. So these things here are using what is called .NET Interactive. But the code that you see over here that you can then run, this editor here is no different than what you could type in, say, VS Code or Visual Studio. So it doesn't look like they call out much. I didn't see an editor listed here. It just seemed to say to create the C# stuff. So depending on what you're using Visual Studio, perfect. Highly recommend it. So anything that you can type into a C# file there can be done here, and this will start to give you a pretty good handle of a lot of the basics of the C# syntax. So especially as you're learning, usually that's the hardest part for people starting out, is just grappling with what is the proper syntax. Like, I need to come up with an incantation and figure out what that needs to be. What is syntax? Perfect. So this is probably a little below it. This next part here on delete all the code in the editor. Yes, boss. This is all around trying to teach the what the syntax needs to look like. And so if you are looking for some information, that would be a good one. these two here are also both very good. So Scott Hanselman and Kendra are very good. I haven't watched this one yet. But both Mika and Bill are also very good. So I would even propose potentially checking out those two. But in terms of the actual assignment, the other thing, C# interfaces. So the this is probably going to be more information than you need, but these are going to be, at least from looking at the assignment, the key language features that are being asked for. Let's see, probably better over here. Reference types, class. So the assignment calls out a static class. The documentation for it is here. Again, there's these last two links are all, I'll say, language level docs. These are not quite your beginner friendly stuff. This is showing you everything. I think the better option is almost assuredly the C# for beginners, or the Microsoft Learn stuff. Oh, where did it go? Where did it go? This one. Because these ones are going to be a lot more interactive and walking you through the basics and trying to explain it step by step. There's something very magical about having both that explanation and the code sitting side by side. I don't think they're going to understand how to create an interface based on the Microsoft Docs. Yes, completely agreed. These ones here, yeah. So Microsoft Learn is an absolutely phenomenal place to go through and get this type of information. I'm going to scan through this thing real quick, see if there's anything else. But it looks like the vast majority of this assignment is create static class, create an interface, and then it's largely around console input and console output. Which are not terribly difficult, but they are worth noting. That's not how you spell world. WRLD. Wish they wrote these assignments in English. Yeah, the other one. Yeah, hello world and introduct. C# interactive. Let me just check this one. This one is probably not bad either. Yeah, because that'll teach you the basics of doing the console write line and formatting your output so that it looks like the pictures. Does it do read line? Right. So this is not bad for figuring out. I'll just do it with C#. Yeah, so if you're already mostly familiar with the basics, this one might be a little bit easier. List collections. These ones, and actually, I'm going to drop this one too, because this is good. I just don't understand the other default functions to input into the line of coding. Sorry, I'm not sure I understand that last statement. I get what they're asking for. Okay. Got it. Okay. So the in terms of just walking through some of these, so The first couple requirements are all about, here's the C# class that you need to create, and it needs to contain a dictionary. And I think some of these initial ones are probably going to cover close to, if not that exact use case. The next requirements are all around creating a menu. So in terms of, here, I'm just gonna do this real quick. It's about to sign off and then I got distracted. See, I always get distracted. Should really quit thinking that I'm gonna sign off. So create project. Come on, any day now. Got too many templates loaded. Way too many. Console App 7, that sounds like a great name. Great, go. So a couple key APIs that you will want to know about. So this Hello World, the last one that I sent, this will walk you through a lot of the how do I create the output, like what those menus are showing. So I don't know what fancy character they're using for like their pretty headers. I don't know how critical that is. I would just use, it could be an X for all I care. But the important API to know about for there is going to be this console write line. This is ultimately for those first screenshots in the PDF where it's showing the output. You're going to end up writing console write lines. This is what is going to end up actually taking and putting that content out to screen. 11 viewers. Streamer becomes popular. My friends are here. That sounds great. So, for example, just picking on, please select an option. Right. So going through this first one for the C# tutorial will at least give you something like this, and I'm gonna go boom, 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 copy paste a bunch of times. Option 1. I'm gonna do this. Browser supports, too good. And then fix the numbering. And then, for example, string input gets console read line. I have no idea if this works in a browser, so we're gonna find out. Console write line. You selected. And so again, this tutorial covers specifically this case here about this $sign at the beginning. The fancy word for this is called string interpolation. But in short, it lets you format output. Free. Okay, short version, don't use console read line in a browser. That's a bad idea. Kind of, yeah, and the urge to hit Control S when writing is too strong. Yeah. You can tell when you've lost work when you get in that habit. But this basic pattern nightmare is what most of this assignment is all based around. Some number of console write lines to generate some output. A console read line call, which allows this will pause your program and wait for the user to type in some answer. And then it will take whatever the user typed in this case 3, and it will put it into the input variable. And then once you have their input into a variable, you can then do whatever you would like with it. So one option is you can write it out to the screen. Another option is you could do if input is free, do the 3 thing. Yeah, I agree. The only reason I think it's read line and not read key, and this is very, very, very subtle, is their output after the input has a blank line, which is why I think it's read line, not read key. That's the only reason. But you are correct, Round Dev. The PDF is definitely not clear in terms of requirements. But because they have a blank line after their input, I assume they did console read line. That's my working theory. Image under number 4. It is a number under the menu as well, indicating input. Yes. Yeah, that's what I was looking at. And that number 1 has a blank line right after it, which is why I think they did a read line. Because when the user presses enter, that submits it. But this is what you would end up doing, is iterate through it. So the menu options in question are view all files in image folder, view all files in text folder, view all files. So the entire point of this is literally to just iterate over a set of files and show which ones are images, which ones are text. Do you mind if I type some stuff for the basic template for the first one, portion by one portion? Go for it. Though I will say I am fading fast and am going to need to sign off here in a bit. If you want to enter some stuff, I am fine with that. You feel free to reach out via the Discord. And go ahead and post some stuff in there. I would. So, and the other thing that I'll say too is it's sometimes it's been a while since I was in college. I will say that, but a lot of times figuring out what the professor is looking for. I know when the students that unfortunately suffer through the class that me and my colleagues teach, unfortunately have to run the gauntlet between instructors that are very prescriptive on assignments and say do X, do Y, do Z, and instructors that leave a lot of ambiguity with the intent for people to figure it out rather than being highly prescriptive. And I don't know, without knowing more about the class and the instructor, it's difficult to say. The other thing that's not actually clear, I assume it is actually trying to show real files in a folder. Yeah, I agree. And oftentimes, at least in terms of me and my colleagues, I tend to be as far to the prescriptive side as possible. I usually go very clear. You can usually walk my assignments bullet by bullet. And if I have left ambiguity, it's intentional to try to make somebody learn something. But it's usually pretty prescriptive of X, Y, Z. And this thing starts off that way a little bit. Of you must have a class, it must be static, it must be named this. I think the intent is to just say that very first point is mostly about this is the one, we want everybody to do it this one way, which is fine. I'm just trying to see. From sorting files to image and text folders. Yeah, I'm really a little torn because some of these points are pretty ambiguous. Like the abnormal content display does not make sense to me because there's been no information given as to what abnormal text is. And I part of me wonders if you're intended to actually implement something like that, or given that this is so ambiguous, I almost wonder if the intent is to hard code values that look like that, but I don't know from just reading this. Where do I input the directory name into the code? That is a good, so if it's straight up hard coded values, you would just type it as a string. If it's actually, so there is some C#, and I see the git cracking question. I'll come back to that real quick. Directory get files. So I don't know that this is what they're, so assuming that you're supposed to use real files and real folder paths, this method here is probably what you're looking for. And specifically, yeah, so on these doc files, just skim to the bottom. Most of them have sample code. And so specifically what you would end up doing is it's worth noting, you will need a using system.io at the top, and then you'll be able to do directory.get files and point it at a string that is a folder path for a target directory. So practically speaking, and I have no idea what this is going to, let's not do it in a browser. That just sounds like a horrible idea. So get files. So if I had a C:temp directory, it would look something like this. And so this would give me an array of type string back listing all of the files in my C:temp directory. Or actually, if I want to do something more interesting, something like that would work. And so then this would be what you would iterate over. Use relatives paths over hard code. Yes, I normally agree. Hard coded for clarity, I'll say that. Worth noting, the @ symbol at the beginning isn't strictly necessary. It's only there because without it, the backslash inside of a string is the escape character. And so you end up needing to, stop helping me. You end up needing to do double backslash inside of quotes to get a single slash. And so oftentimes when working with files and file paths, it's much easier to just put an @ at the beginning, which tells the C# compiler, don't do fancy stuff with my backslashes. Literally treat a backslash character as a backslash character. Okay. Also have a question. Why would someone use git cracking? I am glad you asked. Okay, let me pull this over and pull something interesting up. So you can probably hunt my previous streams in terms of git cracking related content or git related content, specifically around yes, that is a good point. You can use /slashes. They look weird to Windows devs, but the NTFS file system, since like Windows XP days or something, will handle it for you, which is another option. It'll also make you more friendly for cross-plat. That is file paths for cross-plat is a fun rabbit hole that I won't dive down at the moment. But in terms of git cracking, my strong opinion is that developers should know how to use source control, specifically Git, and be able to use it well with one of the Git tools of choice. I've got colleagues who are command lined. I've got some who prefer the actual like built-in stuff in VS Code. I've got some that I've successfully converted to Git Kraken because I think it's awesome. There are lots of cool features in it. The ones that usually sell me on it the most, and this is a bad example, let's pick on something that's not, this is a little more interesting. A little more, my personal reason is I like the visualization of the commit history tree. Being able to quickly get comparisons, but there are a lot of tools out there, and I believe GitHub Desktop has a similar view. Like even like Git extensions, I think it was probably one of the earliest ones that had a reasonable view of the commit graph. But this one is interactable. being able to drag pointers around, double click, bounce. It goes against the usual developer mantra of don't take your hand off the keyboard and put it on the mouse, the keyboard, all the things, which is why so many people like command line. The other thing that it has is they introduced a terminal. So before you panic, it is a PowerShell terminal. It is very similar to the PowerShell terminal inside of VS Code. They actually use the same underlying library that VS Code uses for their built-in terminal, so they didn't roll their own. But the cool parts with it are nice IntelliSense over the Git commands, especially the common ones, which I find to be rather helpful, as well as being able to visualize the graph. So if you prefer terminal-based input, this is usually one of my favorite ways to teach people Git, because I can teach the command line interaction, but also have the visual representation of what's going on right here, which I think is awesome. And like Git Bash certainly works. Oh My Posh is another one that people love a lot. So those types of ones in here. So I think terminal is one reason why I would love Git Kraken. The interactive history graph is another one. I'm trying to think what else. And it's not to say that other Git tools don't have similar-ish features. This one just has been the one that I've loved the most, and this middle view is a big reason for it. Some of the other stuff on the side is nice. There's some other cool little things with the repository management, and they've got the workspaces where you can group stuff together and organize it. They built out a lot of public team stuff. Can I work with public and private repos of the free version? So I think so, but let me confirm. Also, if you're interested in signing up, I wouldn't mind if you wanted to use the referral link. So the big limitation that or I should say one of the limitations I know of with the free version is you don't get access to Azure DevOps. So I don't know if that is a breaker for you or not. Where is I think you can get access to like GitHub private repos, but I don't. Public and private. So I wish they had a feature comparison with the free version. Oh, public only. Probably not. Yeah, probably not private repos. The other unspoken dirty little secret with it is some of these features they can only enforce on certain commands. So for example, pushing and pulling to like private repos or Azure DevOps, you can still use Git Kraken to interact with your Git repo locally. You just won't be able to execute the push or the pull. And consequently, anything with the remote. So fetch, push, pull are the big ones that'll bite you. And you can always drop into other Git tools to do that as well. Which oftentimes I've done occasionally to just like somebody's gotten their repo in a bad state. I'll pull Git Kraken, get it into a good state, not bother with auth because I don't want to try to figure out how to authenticate against whatever Git provider they're using, and then you just tell them, yeah, okay, now you push. I don't want to think too hard. So that is the other kind of kicker there as well. The other, let me look. You don't happen to be a student by any chance, do you? I do not. Okay. I was going to say, because the GitHub student pack is, I believe, comes with a year license to GitKraken. Might have to double check exactly what's in it. See what's in the pack. You know what? Actually, I'm going to just drop this in. If anybody is a student, this is highly recommended. The amount of free stuff that, yeah, because you get access to the whole GitKraken suite. So if you are a student, this is basically a lot of the companies trying to get you suckered into liking their tools so that when you go out and get a job, your employer buys it for you. So, and that's the other thing with a lot of the tools, like the place where I work, we conveniently have a very nice policy that says something along the lines of developer time is expensive, tools are cheap. Therefore, if a tool is going to improve a developer's productivity, buy them the tool. It's a very simple policy. They don't like paying for tools that people don't use, but if there's a tool that will make somebody more productive, usually it's no more complicated than asking for it, which is wonderful. Okay, I feel like I missed a question. I did what you typed out for the menu, but it doesn't work. It works in the .NET editor. So the question will be, so there's a couple of kind of kickers here. So I went and I'm gonna do this. The other thing that's not clear from, really, is there a way to tell this thing to not do this? So this is one of the best and worst things about, you know what, we're gonna just get rid of this. Public class program public static void main. Okay. For the menu, but it doesn't work, but it works in the .NET editor. So something worth noting, depending on which version of Visual Studio you're in and which version of C# and .NET you're targeting, the latest versions of .NET, unfortunately, they have, and I say unfortunate, it's great from a typing perspective. It just, so you're on 2019. I'm gonna do this from memory. There is an option. So there's if you go underneath Tools, Options, and then Search, I believe 2019 has this same setting where you're looking for automatically close the console when debugging stops. I believe in 2019 this defaulted to true and was set to false in 2022. Don't quote me, I'm doing that entirely from memory. This option will keep, if you turn this off, it'll leave your console open so that you can then see the output. The other way that oftentimes people will do this is at the very end of their main method, they will inject a 2019 has it defaulted to true. Thank you. So oftentimes this is what you see pop and go away. But the old school way, so console, right line, hello world. This might be where I tell you to get the simplest thing working and then back away from it. By doing a console read line, it will pause on it. Every time you put in a console read line, it'll make your application pause so it stops. So then after the write line, it'll sit here and wait for input, and then at the end it'll close. So once you press enter on that last read line, depending on the setting inside of the options, it will automatically close or not. And as you can see, 2022, I don't remember if this existed in 2019. They have a nice little output telling you, hey, if you go Tools, Options, Debugging, you can change the automatically closed console when debugging stops. which is great. I would recommend, if the window is closing too rapidly on you, I would propose turning that on, and that will probably go a long way, or just slap a console read line at the end of your main method. The JetBrains writer has so many good features. I need to go back and take another look at writer. I've had some colleagues show me some really slick features that it has. I've got some people that I work with that absolutely love it. I used to be a ReSharper lover for a long time. VS 2022, I decided to not install it and see how long I could go without it. And outside of its really nice support for like inline templates, I'm trying to remember the ReSharper terminology for it, because it had a really nice way of doing inline templates that you could gen stuff up really quickly. Aside from that, the built-in stuff in Visual Studio is pretty darn good. It's pretty good, to the point where I haven't felt the urge to go back to ReSharper. I do miss the template those. Some of the keybinds I can't live without. Duplicate line, etc. Yeah, there's a few of them. So there are some that now exist in Visual Studio, and I think by default some of these are actually on. You are correct that there are some keybinds that only will work in ReSharper that aren't in Visual Studio. But at least duplicate line, Control D will do it. And if you're willing to spend the effort to go through the effort of doing your key bindings, you can get a few more turned on too. For a while I did go through and reset my key bindings to get as many of the ReSharper ones. It just became not worth it. I also used to use the IntelliJ key bindings inside of C#, and I finally had to untrain my fingers from that. It bothered a lot of people who tried to use it. For Unity mod development, and it sucks. Well, interesting. I'm assuming it must be a slightly older version of Unity or similar, because I thought they supported 2022. A lot of their developers are usually Johnny on the spot for going through and doing it. How do you get the text to show up in the console? So I guess it depends on, so if you are referring to the hello world bit right here, that just comes from the console write line call. If you are referring to, because all this is doing is writing console. The other part down here, this is all coming from Visual Studio. And I don't recall if this is in Visual Studio 2019 or not. It might not be. This might be a Visual Studio 2022. Yeah, I don't recall how much of that is in there. So they did a lot of improvements with Visual Studio 2022, and I think some of it was this. I don't recall exactly though. Normally this is the old school way that people would do simple console apps. Version of Unity due to Beat Saber sticking with an older version of Unity. Gotcha. That makes sense. Would you recommend me switch to 2022 to do this project? So the answer to your question on how is Tools, Options, and then on the left side it should be under Debugging General. There's a long list in here. And last time I just searched for it. For me, it's near the bottom. I don't remember where it is in Visual Studio 2022, but you are looking for the automatically closed console. But again, Tools, Options from the menu. And this should be unchecked, and that should keep, yeah, that'll only keep the console window open. It won't give you that extra output like what I had at the bottom. I don't think there's a way for you to get that in an older Visual Studio. But doing a console read line like this and just having it pause at the end should at least get you that much. I don't expect you to see all of this extra output. And there's actually nothing valuable in here aside from telling you where that option is. In terms of the question of should you switch to 2022, I'd probably say yes. What I would probably actually recommend is if the instructor is teaching with Visual Studio 2019, I would stick with that. It'll probably be easier on you to match whatever the instructor is teaching with. Visual Studio 2022 has lots of new features. There's some things that have moved around. It's going to push you onto the latest C#. It's got some really cool IntelliSense and AI built into it to try to make writing code easier. But if it's vastly different than what your instructor is using, it'll probably only make it harder to learn. So I would say it may be worth trying, but I would also propose working in whatever the instructor is using, because that will probably make your life a lot less of a headache. Let's see, 2022 is 64-bit, so use more memory and feel less laggy. Yeah, so in addition to them finally getting 64-bit support, which only took them like many years beyond when it probably should have been done, because it was a big undertaking, it's also it's a lot more performant. You'll note, like, just even the speed at which Visual Studio starts up is significantly faster in 2022. So it is very, there's a lot of niceness to it. So if you were just starting out and learning, how does one make the symbols that cover the heading? That is a good question, and I couldn't tell from the PDF what symbols those were. So the short version is you just type them. So oh, they're just percents? Oh, then I would just do, and then maybe, I don't know, a couple percents there. Hey, Equality, thanks for the follow, I appreciate it. And something like that. Boom. And it's prettier. So it's legitimately just, yeah, just more right line. So legitimately, you should be able to look at the lines in the PDF, and each line of output that you see in the picture should convert into a console write line in your code. And it shouldn't be much more complicated than that. Well, I should say, it doesn't need to be more complicated than that. So, like I said, feel free to drop stuff on the Discord if you'd like. There's plenty of people in there that keep track of it and watch it, but yeah, for what it's worth. Robert, you subscribed again. Thank you. You only need one right line for the header. Yeah, so here. OCD. Yeah. It's also worth noting that there is like console write versus write line. So yeah, so it is like, if hypothetically you wanted to write part of this and then part of so here. So keep threatening to go to bed, and tomorrow's gonna not feel good. So for example, and then I can do this. Hey, nobody pointed out that I didn't spell hello correctly. Okay. So we could do something like this. This is just proof of concept. So You'll note, rather than doing right line, I do rights, which legitimately all they do is not drop down to the next line. I tried to point out. Thank you, Robert. It's probably people are just getting used to the fact that I can't spell to save my life, and so just accept that I'm going to be bad at it. So there is a right method, and the only difference between right and right line is whether it's going to drop onto the next line. % done of the project. Hey, as one of the students mentioned earlier, baby steps. And as we all started somewhere, we all started learning at different points. Yeah, I accepted it. Thanks. So that's gonna be going through the console read again. So pick option, right? And then do show options. So this would be something like if input equals 1, public static void do option 1 function. So this is another reason that you may not want to jump onto latest Visual Studio. You'll note I'm getting extra options. So for example, if I'm going to do some breakpoints. This is something else, and I've been contemplating doing a stream on this Visual Studio debugging stuff. If you're unfamiliar with breakpoints, this little vertical bar left of your line numbers lets you set them. The F9 key will also turn them on or off. But they let you walk through your code a step at a time. So for example, if I press 1 and then hit enter, these little, and VS 2019, they have the same shapes, but they are slightly different colors. This will let you start to look at the state of your program. So if you hover on your variables, you'll start to see, oh, input has the value of 1. And then I can use this thing, step over, and actually we probably should just use step into on all of these, which means go into the thing. So I see, okay, input equals 1, so I went inside my if statement. I can step into again, and now I'm inside of my function. Now I'm at the end of my function. Click it again. Now I'm back where I came from, and now I am at the end of the if, and now I'm at the console read line, and now I am frozen because I'm waiting for the console read line to be resolved. So especially when learning, I oftentimes try to teach people how to use the debugger because it will save you most of what people do when they program throughout the day is debug. I think I probably spend 3 to 4 times more time debugging than I do writing code. It is a very worthwhile skill to learn, just from the standpoint of being able to reason about your code. It's nice to be able to read code and reason about what it's doing, but there's very few substitutes for having a debugger being able to look at current state. So if you are unfamiliar with it, I definitely recommend trying this out and become familiar with the step into, step over, and step out buttons at the top. There's also function keys for them. Let's see, F10 is step over, F11 is step into, and step out is something else. I can't remember. Shift F11. So I need to do 5 ifs. Is that correct? That would be one approach to doing it. So you could do input equals 2, do the thing. Better than doing 5 ifs, because you'll remember once I left here, it started falling down to the rest of the code, would be an else if. Because then after, if this thing ends up being true, it won't bother to evaluate the rest of them. These things start to be mutually exclusive. The other option, and this is what Ron Dev was saying earlier, is another option that is worth considering, especially if you're learning out. So 1 if, 4 else if. Yes, that would be one option. The other way of doing it is you could use what's called a switch statement, not to be confused with a switch expression. But in each of these are the rough equivalent of doing multiple if statements. So what you would do is do function 1, and then consequently down here. So when you end up in a situation would be where you have a bunch of if statements that are all mutually exclusive options. Like if input is 1, it can't also be 2, it can't be 3, etc. So you can only have one of these matches. In those situations, you typically want to switch into a switch statement. It's more performant than a bunch of if conditions. Usually there's a lot of weird caveats with switch, but in general, it's the better option to pick. It also tends to be a little bit cleaner, depending on what you do. Switch is usually more efficient. There's a subjective question that always gets raised about which one is easier to read. And I guess I would raise the question to you. Is this one easier for you to read and understand what's happening? Or is this easier to read and understand what's happening? Because in some cases, these two will compile down to the exact same thing. And in some cases, the switch statement will be faster. I love that quote. Write your code like the next maintainer is a serial axe murderer that has your address. So it's a matter of preference. Yeah, so yes, it is a matter of preference. Functionally, these are both going to do the same thing. Inside of each of these things, they're going to get you the same result. And it often comes down to what is the most readable and maintainable. That's what's really important. And it is subjective in a lot of cases. And there's always the question of, well, if I use all these cool new language features things, it's really cool, but people might not be able to read it. And there's not a 100% answer there. So especially while people are learning, I would say write it whichever way you can read and make sense of the easiest. Worth noting, there is also a default case here, which would be the equivalent of if you had an else block down here that just matches everything else. So this matches not 1 and not 2. Same with this one here. So worth knowing about these two different approaches. Again, there's potentially performance implications. Nobody likes looking at a long string of ifs, especially if these conditions start to get really convoluted. Wait or semicolon. What I usually do with a default is a go-to, but that's just personal preference. Colon after case. Yeah, and that, so the comment in there about a switch statement either compiling down to a set of ifs or a set of, or a jump table. There are where was it? There it is. It's not always obvious what a switch statement is going to compile down into. And it can be quite complicated. So it's fixed now because I had some red squiggly lines. Yeah. So yes, in general, a switch statement will probably be faster in most cases. There's other new language features called switch expressions, which get to be even more fun in how they potentially compile down. A lot of times programmers will often favor the switch statement because they are used to this thing being a jump table and jumping to an individual case. Because for example, if you have five else ifs, to get down to option 5, it has to evaluate this one, then this one, then this one, then this one, all the way down. Whereas a switch statement will oftentimes just jump straight to the right case. And so oftentimes this is why people will prefer this, because of that. It's referred to as a jump table in many cases, where it'll just simply go right to the case that you want, rather than evaluating if this, else if this, else if this, all the way down, in order evaluating 5 things only to realize, oh, I'm the 5th thing, versus just jumping to the 5th thing. I also do appreciate the comment that unless your job is fine-tuning systems, do not worry about performance. Amen. The general policy that you should follow is make it work, make it right, make it fast. So in that order, and problems happen when you try to skip steps. Yeah, you could. So I had this thing invoke a separate function, but it would be very possible to just invoke the code for each function inside of these cases. That would certainly be an option, and given how ambiguous the PDF is, I think within the realm of reason. Unless I missed a line in here somewhere. It just seems to say what to output. It doesn't necessarily say how to output it, which is okay. Cool. Well, and I appreciate the subscribe, Round Dev. I think I am going to drop. My clock has switched to showing AM, and I am probably going to fall asleep with my head on my keyboard shortly. And no problem, Nightmare. Like I said, feel free to oh, sorry, follow. See, that's how tired I am. Follow, subscribe, they're all the same at this point. It's getting too late. Anyone else on Twitch I would recommend? Yes, but probably not on this late. I can check and see. I have a sinking suspicion. None of the ones that I would typically point you to are online at the moment. You can feel free to reach out in the Discord channel if you'd like, and see if there's people in there, and you're welcome to post questions. Oftentimes, people will get responses when possible. Let me see if I can grab a couple of these. So there is a lot of, so actually this, I'll just drop this in. These are not strictly, I guess there's a handful of them online. These are not necessarily strictly C# developers, but and I can't say which ones. I don't recognize the names that show that they're on right now, so I can't speak to them. But generally, the people in that group tend to be fairly helpful, fairly friendly. Definitely worth giving it a shot if you'd like. But most of the other people I would recommend are in that group anyway. Like C# Fritz, who is one of the admins for that, is always very good, especially at producing content for people who are learning. He does a fairly good job of teaching and instructing. So, okay, with that, before I completely fall asleep, I think I'm going to sign out for the night. Tell everyone happy coding, good night, see everyone next time.